Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first live panel. I'm so excited over here at the Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival. We're into day 2 already, and the connected retail experiences, or should we say hashtag connected retail experiences, hashtag CRE 2020, I think. But ladies and gentlemen, great to be with you. I am the moderator. I'm going to just say a few opening remarks, but I'm very lucky because I've got a great panel that's here with me today. I'd like to welcome Ed Bell, the GM of Brand Insights and Marketing Communications at Cathay Pacific Airways, Hong Kong's favorite airline. And I'd like to welcome Jennifer Liu. And Jennifer, of course, is the owner and founder of the Coffee Academics. Best coffee ever, by the way. Okay, end of sales plug there, Jennifer. And also, of course, my buddies, Jonathan Cummings, President, Greater China, Landor and FITCH Group. Great to have you here, Jonathan. And last but not least, also another very dear friend, Chris Brewer, of course, the Managing Director Asia for Ogilvy Consulting. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Brain Trust. You want to talk about customer experience? This is the Brain Trust. I'm an interloper. I'm just kind of listening. What have they got to say? Now, just very quickly for everybody, I just want to share a few very quick slides with all of you, because I think it's important that we talk a little bit about understanding the new consumer. So without further ado, I just want to say that, of course, retail in the old days dismissed digital. And I think it's fair to say that now we've been impacted by these 3 black swan events. We've had, of course, COVID-19, we've got geopolitics, and of course, we've got this changing demographics shift as well. So are we faced with this retail apocalypse? I think this is a question that we're all going to be asking ourselves. And do we have to rethink our strategies? I was, or KPMG were involved in the NRF earlier this year over in New York. Seems like a long time ago since we were on those Cathay Pacific flights, Ed. And obviously, we hear a lot about revenge shopping. And I know Jennifer's doing revenge shopping, but I'm going to be doing revenge traveling. Okay? So I'm going to be revenge traveling on Cathay Pacific. Now, and we all need to be doing revenge traveling on Cathay Pacific. Now, one of the key trends, or some of the key trends that we heard in January, and this is in January, so this is pre-COVID-19. But I think the interesting thing, top of the agenda, we need to be a lot more people-centric. We need to also focus on customer experience. There was a talk about being more intelligent and responsive on our supply chains. It was about the use of data and not just the retention of data. Trust, platforms, cooperation and collaboration, and of course, technological intensity. So what's changed? So we'll have a chat about, do we see, have things changed since the beginning of the year? I also just want to talk very quickly. KPMG's put out a number of global papers. About a couple of weeks ago, we did our Global Retail Trends 2020 paper. The 4 key messages there: business models are evolving. Purpose moves to the forefront. We're going to have a quick chat about that later. Rethinking the cost of doing business. Do we need to tweak our business models? And then also the customer choice. And last week, we also released a new global publication looking at consumers in this new reality. 12,500 consumers across Hong Kong and mainland China, as well as the rest of the world. And there were 3 call-outs. Obviously, the economic impact has influenced behaviors post-COVID or during COVID-19. These new consumers are a lot more digitally minded and tech savvy now. And finally, of course, consumers increasingly purchase from organizations they trust. Moving quickly along, Chinese consumers, we're seeing those Chinese consumers at different speeds. Online sales rose 36.3% year on year across China. And if you are aware of these online festivals, 618, how about that? 618 online festival, 26 billion transactions, 2.38 trillion in terms of those the level of consumption. And of course, we're now seeing the rise of social retailing. We're seeing the rise of live streaming. And of course, we're live today, but we're also, of course, seeing contactless, and that's something else that we do see. Finally, are we ready? We keep hearing about this new normal. So again, are we ready for this new normal? Zoom is a good example, right? I think we're on Zoom today, aren't we? The interesting thing, at the end of last year, Zoom had something like 10 million daily active users. Now, last month, 300 million. So those numbers have increased. TikTok, 800 million. I mean, again, the numbers are quite staggering. So are we ready for this new normal? But also, I'm sure we're going to have an interesting conversation about purpose, because I keep hearing about purpose, and I think that customers are demanding more and more transparency. They're digitally minded, they're more tech savvy. I think they're very aware now. There's a much more social awareness about ethical practices. And I think also there's a much keener eye for authenticity. And we're going to talk a little bit about that across the panel. So just in closing, got to get ready for these emerging technologies, but I'm interested to get your views on the panel. You know, do we need to be AI and blockchain proficient? And is that going to impact all of us? Data, we keep talking about this. Innovation, is it critical? I don't know. I'm going to get your views. But purpose, I think that's something else. Purpose keeps coming up time and time again. And I think Bernie, in the first presentation down under, he also mentioned this point about speed of change, didn't he? So we're now facing this speed of change. We talk about the new normal, but actually it's kind of normal, right? And certainly in mainland China, it is very normal. And again, the need for all of us to listen to our customers on their journeys. And we have to be a lot more transparent. So ladies and gentlemen, that's it. We're going to just cut over now to, of course, our distinguished panel members. Ed, I just want to get your views. That's right, got to go this way, right? I want to get your views because, of course, we are seeing changing consumer behaviors. And I think people have been stuck at home. We were just talking about this earlier on. I've been stuck in Hong Kong, I think, for the last 4 months. I've seen my wife more in the last 4 months, and we've been together for the last 29 years. But I mean, is travel ever going to return? Are we going to be flying again?
Well, let's hope so.
I mean, do people want to travel again? I mean, that's the other question, right? If I've got Zoom and if I've got all of these other different channels, do I need to travel?
You definitely need to travel, Anson. And I think your
travel.
wife might agree with me.
I think she will. I think she definitely does.
No, I think we need to properly pass the data and not falsely ascribe drivers for data artifacts. So of course people aren't traveling right now, but is that because people don't want to travel? No, it's because they can't travel. So I think for the travel to resume, what we really just need is for travel bans to be lifted, and then we're going to see a lot of traveling happening again. That's one aspect of this. I think there's, in terms of the behavior and that we've seen changing, there's a couple of things that you've mentioned. In terms of one of the things that we've really noticed, if you think about as marketers, often the time we're thinking about the Maslow pyramid, and we tend to market to the top of that pyramid. We tend to focus on those emotional needs and who am I? And you try and drive, that's where premium brands get a lot of their power from. But what we've seen is, of course, really that triangle being flipped upside down. And I think really the behavior, if you want to get to the behavior that we're focusing on right now, it's the behavior where people are saying, I'm concerned about, is it safe to travel? Is it safe to be in an airplane? So those kinds of things. So what you've seen us doing recently and a lot of the other airlines is just telling people, just calm down, let's not panic. Let's go through the details of exactly how safe it is to travel. So For example, one of the facts that I came across a little while ago, you know, in people's minds, they have this idea that you're in an airplane and you're breathing and everyone else is there. And of course, that feels and sounds kind of very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
You might be amazed, Anson, to know that to this day, all around the world, there's not one single case of COVID-19 being contracted inside an airplane.
Really?
Not one case. Now, that includes crew. Now, of course, the crew are the ones who've been flying backward and forward. There's not one single case. Now, part of the reason for this, again, you just got to fight the fear with the facts.
Because there's mass hysteria. You know, there is mass hysteria there. Social media.
Please don't make it more hysterical in the way you talk about the hysteria.
Okay. Calm down.
I'm trying to calm it down.
Calm down.
So we could all get back to travel.
Calm down.
So, you know, of course, the virus is still out there. So, you know, with the latest in science, what we understand is actually part of the reason why there's probably been no confirmed cases inside a plane is because you're not facing face to face like you are in a bar or a restaurant. People are facing forward and then just, you know, wearing masks. You know, that captures a lot of the droplets. But the other thing that people don't realize is actually the air flows in a vertical corridor from the ceiling. It gets pushed out in a vertical downward fashion. It gets sucked in the bottom. So everyone is sitting basically in a virtual air cabinet.
Okay.
And the air doesn't go forward and back. It goes vertically. So what that does is it actually means that you're not, despite the impression people have, you're not sharing the air with all these other people.
Okay.
You're just really sharing it with yourself.
Okay. That's interesting, Ed. And also, I think the other thing that I think is really, really important, we can talk a lot about AI and tech and blockchain, but the human touch.
Well,
I think the human touch is really important.
I wanted to come to that and to build on what you were saying about, you know, the human dimension and the previous workshop we went to. You know, when we say that travel, you know, people aren't traveling, what does that mean in human terms? I think what that really means is that people have had huge chunks of their lives just chopped off.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes to understand that in human terms, you have to think about stories. So people that I just work with, you know, you're talking about fathers that haven't seen their 8-year-old daughter for 6 months. And I'm sure we all have people that we know, or, you know, you've been apart from your husband or your wife, sure, you know, from, you know, perhaps, you know, even longer. And of course, for businesses, people running businesses around the region, this can be, you know, very dangerous. And of course, this is not just about money. This is about providing the ability to give salaries to people so that they can feed their children. So I want to just bring that back to, you know, that travel is not a nice to have. I think for the way that we live now in the world, travel is a very much an essential part of who we are and how we live.
Sure.
And when you think about the geopolitical, you know, tensions, I also think that travel makes us nicer and travel makes the world friendlier, because through travel, you understand. You get to know those people, you get to feel them, and they get to feel that you understand them. And so I think we just, you know, the world needs us to travel again. And I think it's going to be, you know, important and wonderful for all the reasons, you know, that we can get those travel bans lifted and we keep the safety and security in place. And
so Ed, I'm hearing you, we all need to travel for business as well. So I'm just reaching out to my managing partner, Aisha. I think it's really important that we travel, Aisha. That's anyway, moving quickly along. Jennifer, you and I caught up, I think last week, didn't we? I think we did catch up last week. Are we seeing new ways of shopping? And I mean, for coffee, you know, for TCA, best coffee ever. But for TCA, are you seeing, you know, are you still seeing people come into your stores? I mean, are they physically coming in and ordering their lattes and cappuccinos and all the other coffee blends?
Well, yes. I guess before all the revenges, you know, that's happening to revenge traveling, I'm sure, you know, coming soon. There's revenge coffeeing going on right now.
Revenge coffeeing.
Because I think, as you know, as Ed says precisely, that people need to socialize. You know, people need to meet and greet. People need to give each other a hug, and people need to, you know, to meet and talk and share their feelings and all that. So I think coffee shops are exactly that. You know, we are the space that people come together and, you know, enjoy and have food and chat and share their feelings. And I think, it's very exciting to see that, in Hong Kong especially, that people are coming out again. Maybe not to, to very, very expensive restaurants yet. Although I think for the past weekends, it's very difficult to get reservations into any sort of top restaurants as well. So I guess, in February and March, we definitely relied heavily on the e-shopping. Luckily, our own roastery came up with, good products that were sold online and also like in our own platforms and also on some other people's platforms. And we start to send it to to other parts of the cities and also out of Hong Kong. And then we also start to sell equipment, and when we also provide our own recipes where people can just follow, and then they can go on YouTube, they can go into like IG stories, they can look at how we do our own coffees, and they could do the same at their homes. And then, all that sort of pushes us out of our own comfort zone and our own boundaries, and thinking that coffee or F&B, it's really just a tangible business. It's now going a lot more online than before. Which is very exciting, because now that when people are coming back to the stores, they also know about the shopping. They also know about how to do their own coffee at their homes, and then also they want to come back to the stores and talk to the baristas and learn more new tricks and new experiences. So, I think this month we're probably back to normal.
Okay, back to normal.
Back to normal, comparing to
comparing the last few months.
Yes. So, the next exciting thing would be, how do we exceed the norm from here onwards? With the new vending machines that we're rolling out, the new e-shopping that, we're spending, we've spent a few months to test and run really well. I think coffee is no longer just a social place and a social drink. It's now doing a lot more than before.
That's excellent.
It's coming out from COVID.
That's good to know. And it's great to hear that the business is returning.
Because except for, some overseas locations.
Of course, of course.
But, for Hong Kong, we're quite happy at where we are right now.
That's great news. And also, as we just said, I think Stuart Bailey, by the way, Stuart Bailey, Anson Bailey, we are not related. We are best buddies, but officially we're not related. But Stuart mentioned earlier on about virtual coffee breaks. And that is funny, because we talked about this last week as well. And you've got these virtual coffee breaks. So check out the virtual coffee breaks and learn about making a proper cup of coffee, right? Jonathan, I want to come over to you, my friend.
Yes, Anson.
I'm very impressed by your very manly looks this afternoon, my friend. Kind of that Grizzly Adams version. But retail, bricks and mortar. We've heard a few positive stories there, but let's talk about this. Traditionally, bricks and mortar. Are those retailers doomed? We're all doomed. But are we doomed? And I think, can the landlords, can the brands reinvigorate the shopping experience? Because this is a huge challenge for everybody.
It is. And I think the interesting thing is, when you phrase a question like that and people talk about physical retail or bricks and mortar, already you're kind of pushing yourself into a corner. Immediately there. Ed's talked about this kind of human need, this sort of human need to move, to get out the house, whether that's traveling overseas, but even just going to a coffee shop or going to a store or going to a mall or going to a restaurant. We have a fundamental human need to get out and move. We don't have, in some cases, a functional need. We can buy through e-commerce, we can order through Deliveroo, everything, but we have a human need to get out. We live in a connected world. The platforms are there. I believe something like over half of retail sales last year globally were sitting on some kind of online marketplace. So we've got to think of retailers, malls, as consumers, we've got to think about the human side first. And then it's physical, and then it's the role of digital within that. And as soon as people start putting themselves or their activities into any of those buckets and starting putting separation between those, they get themselves into trouble. So the opportunity is, for the physical part of a physical human digital approach is absolutely there. And the opportunity, as Bernie was saying before, through this time, is now for a level of innovation that we haven't seen, that's kind of been there in the future. That investment into digital, but equally, I think that investment back into the human side. Bernie talked about earlier on the previous session, which I love, and it's something that I've used a lot. Taking back. When did you Anson? You said in your opening remarks that about retail becoming more human. I mean, what's amazing when you think about it is how it lost that human touch. Right? You think about. I mean, I'm obviously English as yourself, and we are a nation of shopkeepers. Shopping. Historically, retail historically was the most human, the most connected of activities. And somehow through the last century, we managed to lose that. So the opportunity to bring back that connection and then use technology to do that at scale, to kind of build an element of hyper relevance into the experience is there. And I think just as a sort of parting thing within that, technology, we get very excited about technology. And obviously, as you know, at FITCH and Landor and FITCH, we do some of the most innovative retail work in the world. I would be immodest enough to say.
Very modest.
However, we believe very strongly that technology is an enabler, not the driver. It's about the experience, it's about purpose, it's about the human connection, it's about service first. And then it's a case of how can we use technology, how can we use data to deliver that, not about what can we do with VR.
Jonathan, two standout quotes already. Two standout quotes. Retail lost its human touch, like that. And of course, you mentioned that tech as the enabler. So you're on fire. You're on fire there, Jonathan. Chris, buddy, just a quick one. You're doing some very cool, innovative things at Ogilvy. What are you hearing? And you're having a lot of those conversations with those brands. I'm always rather bemused when, of course, we talk about the brands really understanding their customers. Do they?
Well, first of all, before I answer that, coffee, top of Maslow's hierarchy for me, good coffee. So I just want to put that out there. I think, first of all, it's important to start with why do you need to understand your customers? And we've already kind of touched on it here. We see a lot of brands that have been very technology led. They've kind of bought into the AI buzzword, they've bought into blockchain, and they've started with the technology first. And definitely retail has lost its human touch. So, and I also think there's different degrees of understanding your customer. If you talk to different brands, some brands understand their wider market. And of course, things like millennial and Gen Z are thrown out as big addressable markets. And you can generalize all you like about those. So you can generalize that millennials like experiences more than products. You can generalize that Gen Z are all about purpose and changing the world and fixing the world. And that's great. I think that's good directional stuff that everybody kind of needs to get to. But what we're seeing, I think, with brands, particularly in this climate, and I'm going to try and not use the other C word to see how far I get, that we mentioned a few times. But in this current climate, I think brands that have really been able to change and pivot really quickly have understood their customer, because it's going from your audience coming to you in a market like Hong Kong, where you've got a lot of tourists, to then saying, well, actually, we need to now reach out. We need to go to new channels. We need to go to new places. And you can't do that if you don't understand your customers at an intimate level. Maybe I can just expand on what I mean by intimate level as well, because I think the addressable market and the intimate level are very different things. I think a lot of businesses also look at different segments in terms of spend and various other things, but actually it is getting to what you mentioned, Jonathan, that human understanding of the individual customers that you have. At a one-to-one level, of course, is the ideal state that brands want to get to, but actually just clustering understanding that you might have, say, for our coffee academics, you might have an audience that wants to be at home and wants to have these experiences at home, that buys a certain brand of coffee that is in a particular family unit or whatever, and does a particular job and has a number of needs that need to be met. I'm finding that brands are really pushing to try and get to that intimate level as they start to move into other channels and start to look at their business models at the moment.
Okay, Chris, thanks. So we need to go to new levels.
Yes.
More intimate levels. Yes. Okay, interesting. Yep. I noted that down. Jennifer, I'm going to come back to you as well, because when we caught up last week, we were talking about the importance of contributing to society. And we were talking about the need for all of us to think about how can we be more transparent. We were talking about that trust equation and how important that is. So what's Coffee Academics doing in dealing with this? Because we just heard about purpose, and we heard that those consumers now being a lot more digitally minded, a lot more tech savvy, they're watching you and they're watching TCA.
Well, yes, I guess, a lot of the younger customers these days are definitely about like what's behind the coffee that I'm drinking, right? What's in it, apart from the taste, apart from the decor, apart from, the service and all that. Like what purpose is there? What mission, and bringing to the world. So, working with the roastery, I think from very early days on, we were very selective with the procurement. So now, we are, after 7-8 years, we managed to say that, 70% of everything that we procured is actually from farms that have a strong purpose. So we just brought in a new coffee bean from Costa Rica, for example. Right now, we support about 35 farms in different parts of the world, but this particular Costa Rica one, it's helping the jaguars, like the wildlife. So like every sack of beans that we purchase from them, it gives back to the jaguars in the region. So we also work with Ethiopia, for example, that every coffee volume that we purchase, they will help purchase running shoes for the younger girls, so that they have like a pair of running shoes. So all these stories or all these purposes are no longer just on a certificate. I think younger generation actually want more. They want to be part of the story. They want to be able to see a video. They want to see the reality side of things. They want to meet the farmers, even if it's a virtual meeting, or getting to understand how even a cup of coffee can change their lives. So I think especially during the COVID period, we've spent a lot of time communicating with all these farmers, and not just financially or economically supporting them, but also to see how we can bring the stories, and how by purchasing coffee can help through this pandemic. So we're very happy that starting forward, like moving forward, not saying that we'll bring in blockchain immediately, but I think something along the lines that traceability, people can trace, people can actually see how they contribute and how far, for example, a school gets built. It can be seen from cameras, or like from different type of technology experience can bring that charity part closer to the customers. That's the main goal moving forward.
Sure.
For us.
And I think you're right. The consumers nowadays, the social values, I think, are a big part of what we're seeing. And that trust and transparency equally, I think, are very important. So it's great to hear that you're supporting 35 farms and that 70%.
You've actually tasted about maybe 12 of them last week.
I did.
Right?
I did a coffee little skills training with Jennifer to improve my understanding of coffee. But it is amazing in terms of the different beans. And I think what's powerful, and what will be powerful, is where you can track where those coffee beans are coming from. In the future, that will happen, right?
Yes.
In the future, because of these technologies, it goes back to Jonathan's point about technology as an enabler. We will be able to see where those coffee beans and that particular blend, which farm in Costa Rica is it from?
Yes.
And we can potentially communicate with that farmer in Costa Rica as well. So again, it is amazing, but technology is not here to save the world. As I think Jonathan pointed out, technology as an enabler. Ed, I want to come back to you. Marketing, and we talk a lot about our marketing models. Are we going to have to change those marketing models right now? Are we going to have to do things differently? And in fact, why don't we do this? Angus, we have a polling question. In fact, we have got a couple of polling questions. So for all of our virtual delegates, hi everyone. If I can ask you to just get on and help us with this polling question. We're going to put up the polling question. At the height of COVID-19 crisis in your markets during the lockdown, how did your brand primarily choose to communicate with your customers? A, B, C, or D? Did you take the opportunity to tell them we care? B, reassured them that things will soon get better. C, business as usual, continued with our usual campaigns. Or D, we went silent, we had nothing to say. Probably not D. But what are people saying? So if we can ask everybody to do a little voting, because that kind of helps us to have this conversation about what should we be thinking about in terms of reaching out to our clients, reaching out to the market. So maybe we should give that a few more seconds, Angus. But let's go back to that question then, Ed. So in the meantime, during this short little polling question, what do we need to do differently? Because obviously, Cathay Pacific, you've been very active recently, and one of the good things is there's been an active campaign to let people know that, hey, we're here and we're getting ready for your return, and you've been putting out a lot of things in social media.
Yeah, I suppose it's true for all brands that actually the usage of a brand is probably its best advertising or marketing. So walking into a store, walking into a coffee, academics, cafe, that's probably the strongest brand experience you can have. And I think we felt that when people weren't flying as much, you don't get that brand feeling because you're not experiencing the product. So if anything, we've actually been doing more. And whether or not people have picked that up, I'm not sure, but certainly the volume of our posts, our social posts have gone up. And some people may have seen a little campaign we did. It was actually shot on iPhones during the lockdown. Mm-hmm. It was called Till We Fly Again. It was all kind of things that you could see in your home and kind of inspired you to travel again. So those kinds of things have been focused on just keeping the passion alive and keeping that connection there with people. Because we did start out with our communication strategy saying, as I said before, that the pyramid's turned upside down. So let's really focus on, let's not try and sell anything. Let's just really focus on telling people what we're doing to make it as safe as possible for people to travel. So that's what we've started with, and we're continuing to do that. So that's like a baseline. And I think that's how maybe marketing has changed right now, is that you have to respond to the situation. If your business model has been impacted by the circumstances, then you have to be agile and adapt. But then what we're also doing is actually, as I said, going back into some of that bonding and just reminding people about how fun it is to travel and kind of why we want to travel. But I think fundamentally what I believe is that the job of marketing is really to inspire purchasing and usage and consumption. So I don't think ultimately it's going to change at all. Sooner or later, when people want to travel, the job of marketers is going to be to connect that willingness to pay to a way to go and travel and to make it happen. And I think it maybe has a connection to some of the technology points as well, because I think what we've seen over the last several years, particularly with the rise of e-commerce, is a tendency for brands to do a lot more selling and maybe a little less marketing. And I think that this is an interesting one, because where we are now is you've seen the natural demand level has dropped down a little bit because habits have become interrupted and we're doing other things. We're doing Zoom meetings rather than flying to the meeting. So what we're going to have to do now is we're going to have to inspire people to do that again. We're going to have to restart the engines. And that's, a job for marketing. The marketers have to stand up.
Excellent. I think that's a very good point. We've got to be inspiring people, not just selling to people, but actually marketing people. Chris, we're running out of time, ladies and gentlemen. I've still got lots of questions, and I think there's also a couple of other questions that we can take from our virtual delegates. Chris, we're hearing a lot about safety, health, wellness. That's getting a lot of attention. We're talking and we're hearing about retail brands now that are suffering in this new normal. So how can brands stay relevant in this new normal?
Yeah, I mean, even before the new normal, I think, I forget who mentioned it, but I think safety, health and wellness, they were there already. People demanded that. And it's really been, put into a new context. And I think brands are just figuring out how to accelerate around it. And I think some of the stuff you mentioned, Ed, around sort of providing facts to address safety concerns is definitely going to be one of those things. But I think now we're going to see safety and health and wellness built in as a pillar, if you like, to the communications and the way that brands kind of deliver their proposition. Because I think safety you can address with some simple facts, you can address it with some simple things, but actually maybe there's some behavioral science there. Maybe there's some convincing to consumers that we need to do to get them to overcome these perhaps sometimes irrational fears that can be addressed through ways that brands communicate, or the way that they do things within the experience. I would say health and wellness is, just putting safety aside a second as an important pillar, health and wellness is almost a platform for brands, particularly when they're trying to reach a new generation of customers that they can own. But they have to do it in an authentic way. I think, Jonathan, you mentioned, the brand has to be able to own it, right? You're not going to get a fast food chain that is going to be doing some kind of opening a gym, right? It's not, and trying to provide, it just doesn't compute. But I think it becomes a platform for brands, particularly things like insurance, if done right, where the frequency of purchase is very low, that you create this engagement platform around health and wellness that grows your engagement with the consumer beyond perhaps the core product, and allows you to engage in a more authentic way, allows you to capture more customers potentially, and allows you to retain those customers. So I think, if anything, the current situation, avoiding the C word again, allows brands to push forward with this a little bit and figure that out. And I think also what I've seen is brands are willing to take a little bit more risk in working that out, because they've almost been given permission, because everything kind of went to pot. People had to work stuff out very quickly, and I think consumers actually were very receptive of that.
Okay. Yeah. Jonathan, can I just ask you as well, because we're hearing about the consumers, they're more digitally minded, they're tech savvy, they're more socially aware, they're more mindful. And that also, we've been hearing about consumption and the fact that these mindful consumers are now kind of toning down on consumption. I mean, is that going to continue? Are we going to see this new normal where, of course, people are going to start taking their foot off the pedal? They're not going to be buying as much.
I'm not sure it's necessarily about buying so much, but definitely there's even before this current situation, and as Bernie said earlier, it's more about an acceleration, but there's definitely an increase in mindfulness in more broadly, whether that's climate change, whether that's Black Lives Matter, whether that's Me Too, whether that's a whole number of different things, and now it's health and safety. There's an increase in people's mindfulness in what they buy, how they buy, who they buy from, what they consume, what they do with the waste, etc., etc. That's here to stay, I hope, because that sends the whole world backwards if we're not. And I think the retailers, along with other parts of the business community, need to react to that. And I just want to add, I think, just because we are a part of the Start Me Up Festival here, a lot of big retailers, Stuart mentioned it in his opening, Mark, they struggle with this because they're kind of big and they've built these big operations and they're not particularly agile. And I hope that over this next period of time, that retailers, as well as businesses in other industries, do think about how they can innovate by embracing more agile, whether that's kind of great technology coming out of startups, or whether, from a retail point of view or a mall point of view, it's the brands that they stock, and actually just open up their thinking in terms of how they meet some of these consumer needs.
Yeah, because I think that's a very interesting conversation, and we don't have time to handle it now, but we hear a lot about the big retail players, but actually here in Hong Kong, we have some very cool niche retail players and fashion designers. In fact, I think on Thursday, the Ecosystem Summit, we're going to be at the Mills. And I think there's going to be some really interesting things that are being discussed. with those niche players and the smaller players. And I'm very excited about that because they now have a chance to shine. But Jennifer, just talking about the local scene here in Hong Kong, I think the Hong Kong RMA, the Retail Management Association, about 5 or 6 weeks ago, were talking about how potentially, I think 20,400 retail stores were going probably to close down. I mean, that's very sad. But are there any messages that we can share with everybody here on our panel? What would be your message to the retail community and perhaps those young entrepreneurs out there as well?
Well, I think definitely there will be a little bit of a change of people coming in and people going out after this period, because a lot of friends I know, for example, they've been not really profiting too much from the business, nor are they really too happy with their business, but they because of passion, because of whatever, they will stay on. But this period really is a cool down period for a lot of companies that decide to stay, or they should exit or do something different. But then again, I think like SARS 12 years ago or 13 years ago, there are still a lot of opportunities for newcomers to come into the market and do different things. So I think it's all down to calculations, right? If you work out the numbers, and if you feel like it's time for you to make a change, I think people can really take advantage of some of the lower rentals these days. And then of course there are still a lot of great talents that are available right now. That's the time.
So now is the time. Carpe diem, seize the day. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are literally, time is up. But I love buzzwords. So the final comment from each of you. I mean, what's your buzzword to all of our virtual delegates and friends out there? What's the buzzword? I mean, what's the one thing perhaps we need to start doing regarding all of these changing consumer behaviors? What's the profound buzzword, Ed? Come on.
Inspire growth.
Okay, inspire growth. Jennifer, we've got inspire growth.
Reignite your passion.
I like that one. Reignite your passion. Jonathan, this better be good. This better be good.
I was going to say that. Focus on individual human needs.
Okay, could have been better, but okay. Focus on individual.
I was going to say that.
Bit of a mouthful. Chris, we're looking for you to send this one home.
I think integrate authentically. All the things we talked about, purpose, safety, do it authentically, not as a superficial thing. Integrate authentically.
I like that one. Integrate authentically. Ladies and gentlemen, I think my buzzword would be innovate or die. That's quite profound, right? But I do think for all of us out there, we have to really innovate, get ready for this speed of change, because it's here. It's happening today, and it's not going to slow down, is it? So, ladies and gentlemen, I could go on and on and on, as you well know, but please join me in thanking Ed and Jennifer and Jonathan and Chris, and check out the rest of the Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival. We're day 2. It's happening the whole week. So please join us. And Yami, back to you.
Thank you very much, Anson. That was such an interesting panel. Thank you to our experts. And we're going to be back soon after the commercial.